Good afternoon and welcome to today's webcast, 6 Tips for the Retiring Independent Advisor, sponsored by Chalice Financial Network. I'm Cindy Taylor, publisher of FinTech News. Before we get started, there are a few things I'd like to mention. This webcast has been accepted for 1 hour of CE credit towards CIMA, CIMC, and CPWA designations. Instructions for receiving credit will be available at the end of the webcast. You could participate in the Q&A session by asking questions at any time during the presentation, and the questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Just type your question into the Ask a Question text area in the bottom of your console, or click on the Q&A widget, then click the Submit button. As a reminder, Financial Advisor Magazine and FinTech News regularly feature a variety of educational webcast presentations and conferences on topics important to you and your clients. All of our events are announced in our electronic newsletter, FA News, our website, fa-mag.com, and in Financial Advisor Magazine. Our speakers for today's webcast are Diana Cabrices and Sean Rogers. Diana Cabrices is AVP of Business Development at Chalice Financial Network. Previously, Diana worked at Succession Link as an account manager connecting financial advisors and RIAs who are interested in buying, selling, or merging their practices as members of the leading networking and communication platform. During her time with Succession Link, she has spoken directly with over 500 sellers and has a wealth of knowledge on the topic. Diana holds a BBA in Business Economics from Georgia State University in Atlanta, Georgia. Sean Rogers is Chief Revenue Officer at Chalice Financial Network. He has 21 years of diverse, progressive, and successful experience. Prior to joining Chalice Financial Network, he was CEO, COO, and Managing Director of several financial companies. Sean holds FINRA Series 7, 24, 63, 65, and 79 registrations, and is a graduate of the University of Illinois. That's a lot of registrations, Sean. Now please help me welcome Diana Cabrices. Diana, take it away.
Thank you, Cindy, for the warm introduction. My name is Diana Cabrices, and I'm super excited to be here and share some great content with all of you. I'll have to be honest, I am more of a face-to-face kind of girl, so not seeing you guys or your reactions, it feels different. But, Cindy mentioned we have a live Q&A at the end, and I'm really looking forward to being able to interact with some of you guys and answer your questions. The information that I'm going to cover today, it's honestly applicable to any financial advisor, whether you feel you're on the buy or the sell side, or maybe you just don't know. The learning points are going to absolutely help you. So let's take a look at some current advisor demographics and how that relates to advisor retirement. Have you ever heard of the phrase, the shoemaker always wears the worst shoes? In the aspect of retirement, I think this is accurately descriptive of the way financial advisors operate. Many advisors are helping their clients with retirement plans and setting them up for a successful retirement, yet they actually aren't doing the same thing for themselves. So the fact is, advisor retirement is on the rise. Actually, around 39% of advisors are over the age of 55, and about a third of them are completely unsure about their succession plan. If they're managing over $6.6 trillion in assets collectively, which we see here on the screen, that tells us there's a pretty big group of clients out there that are in a way unprotected. So what's going to happen to all those clients if their advisor doesn't have a plan? Or if there was a sudden significant business disruption? Within a few short days of an event like this, firms have no trading authority, no banking authority, no authority to run payroll. It's really not a pretty situation. So I think the issue is that many advisors believe they have all the time in the world to set up a plan. But we know time flies. We get caught up with life, and before you know it, it's years down the road. I do think, aside from that, I think another challenge is actually finding the right match to set up a plan with. And we'll talk a little bit later about how technology can help you do this. So let's start with tip number 1 of 6, making your retirement goals clear. So what do you really want to achieve out of your retirement? Whether retirement is on the horizon for you, or maybe it's not, and you feel that you've got another 10 years or so running your practice, it is vital to make sure you are clear about your retirement goals. And we've all been taught from a young age that in life, if we want to achieve something, the best way to go about doing that is to set goals. But to be more specific than that, you need to set SMART goals. And this is something I was drilled on in business school. I'll never forget it, but I'm appreciative of it. So SMART goals are specific, measurable, they're attainable, realistic, and timely. That's where we get SMART. So really thinking about setting SMART goals when you're planning for retirement. Okay, now most advisors struggle to mentally set aside the business, which is why it is always a good idea to have a plan of what you're going to do with your life when you say goodbye to your firm once and for all. Looking at the slide here are some questions that you find yourself or advisors find themselves asking. So how do I let go? What will my clients do without me? When will I know it's the right time? How is my family going to adapt when I retire? Is my successor adequately prepared? And what will I do with all of my free time? With all of the advisors I've spoken to that are trying to start the succession planning process, I have heard every single one of these questions. So if I were to be in front of a room of you all right now, and I'm not, we're on a webinar, but I would ask you guys to raise your hand to my next question. How many of you have ever said the phrase, "I will work till I die"? Yeah, aside from my business is unique, I would say this is one of the most common phrases I've heard coming from financial advisors. So you guys are very intelligent. I mean, financial advisors, they're assertive, they're high energy, but at some point you have to realize that even every great leader knows the importance of not getting too comfortable at the top. Also, it's really easy to avoid these conversations if they think, or if you consider them at least equivalent to losing control. But what's really important to understand, and perhaps this is something that you will help you in your reasoning, letting go and thinking about why your reasons should be worthy enough of letting go, is why are you thinking about retiring? What is it that would drive you to make that decision? Perhaps you want to travel with your family, do activities that require time that you really couldn't ever do before managing your business. Maybe you want to get into another business, a totally different line of work. I mean, outside of managing money, surely you have some other passions. So ask yourself these questions, and if you can come up with at least 2 solid reasons to start preparing for retirement, you can start to feel more confident in moving forward to build your plan. Now, it's also helpful to look within and learn about the type of leader you are and how that plays a role into your retirement mindset. I want to briefly talk to you about something I picked up from Jeffrey Sonnenfeld's book, The Hero's Farewell. So Sonnenfeld describes 4 types of departures for entrepreneurs leaving their companies: the monarch, the general, the ambassador, and the governor. So let's start with the monarch. So the monarch is the leader who believes the mission never ends and is only replaced due to death, illness, or revolution. The general. The general is another archetype who struggles to live without the battle of improving the company. And the general is replaced following the decisions of others. There's the ambassador. The ambassador is the leader who departs gracefully, continuously, and advises the company leaders as when he believes his advice is needed. And lastly, the governor. The governor leaves gracefully, but struggles to achieve the feelings of accomplishment described above. So typically, they go on to chase other endeavors outside of the company. Now, in the book, Sonnenfeld suggested that most of these leaders, you'll relate to maybe a mix of these archetypes. But just hearing that, which do you feel most resembles you? What do you resonate with, and how do you feel this could affect your retirement? Definitely some food for thought. So as advisors, one of the first retirement goals you'll most likely have in mind is money. You're numbers people, right? So thinking about a payout is usually the first thing that crosses your mind when you start thinking about how your exit will look like. Now, while the market does change, it's good to learn about your payout options early on. So how are you going to receive your payout? Well, you opt for an ongoing revenue stream, and where the payments you received are based on revenue share. This is otherwise known as an earnout. Or do you find that a lump sum payment is more along the lines of what you want? Or maybe you like the idea of receiving increment payments over time, but you just don't want them dependent upon the successful transfer of accounts. Well, let's take a deeper look into all of these options here. So before we go through these, I do want to share with you all that I get many questions about deal structures all the time. It's probably the hottest topic when talking to advisors and talking to them about succession. So I do want to shed a little bit of light here. So business sales in general, they're rarely completed without some type of financing. You'll want to know where the buyer is going to get the money to purchase your business, and generally the money is going to come from either third-party financing or seller financing, or a combination of both. And seller financing is involved in around 90% of small business sales. So if you're not willing to finance at least some of the price, you may find it a little bit more difficult to sell your company sooner rather than later. The other option is obviously for the buyer to obtain third-party financing. But if the buyer is planning to obtain outside funding, the bank or the lender should confirm to you that the buyer is qualified and that the lender is willing to come up with the money before you take negotiations too far. And just from what I've seen, most seller notes go anywhere between 3 to 5 years. So let's talk about ongoing shared revenue stream. So again, we refer to this as an earnout, and this tops the list of deal structures. It's definitely the most common. And it requires a little bit of skin in the game from all parties, quote unquote. The buyer and seller establish a purchase price. The seller can ask for a down payment up front, and then the rest of the payments are contingent on revenue share. The pro here is that as a seller, you'd get a steady stream of income at a lower tax rate, but the con is, what if you lose one of your largest accounts? The buyer can use clawback and readjust the purchase price accordingly. For this reason, I added here seller stay on here on the slide, and many sellers who are not looking to exit right away will continue working alongside the advisor, whether it's in a similar capacity or maybe perhaps in a consulting role. And this could have a positive impact on the transfer of accounts. You're involved. If you're a super client-centric advisor, this truly may be the best route for you. Or this could be if you're looking to continue working but just lessen your load a bit, have another 2 to 5 years before wanting to make a complete exit, could be a good fit for you as well. And then we get into seller financing. So another common deal structure we see involves seller financing, as I mentioned earlier. And seller financing in the form of a promissory note usually includes a loan from the seller to the buyer at a certain interest rate written on a promissory note form. And then payments on seller notes are usually fixed, usually according to the agreed upon interest rate. In some cases, the seller notes and the payments made are made contingent upon the financial or other performance of the business. So a bit of a combination of seller financing, earnout, and these are some of the benefits to consider when you're thinking about seller financing and if this deal structure is fitting for you. So seller notes are going to allow you to, 1, increase the buyer pool to encourage more competition, which could result in a higher sell price. We all know it's a seller's market right now as well. 2, improve the probability of selling the business. 3, provide you with future income in the form of loan payments. And 4, spread your income out into future years, which may allow you to better manage your income tax brackets, as mentioned in the earnout deal structure. Then we get to lump sum payment. While I have seen this from time to time, it's certainly not as common for sellers to ask for a lump sum payment, and that is all of the purchase price up front. There are buyers who will tout that they have the cash up front to buy your book of business, but do you really want to receive all of the money up front? Is this something you've even thought about? Let's take a look at the pros and cons. So the pro here is that you'd receive a large amount of money or a large amount of cash, right, up front that you can invest in something else that you may feel to have a better rate of return. And then the con could be you'll get taxed at a higher tax bracket. And even in some cases, maybe you'll find that you're not spending the money wisely and you'll later come to regret it. And yes, this happens even to financial advisors. And then lastly, we see the last bullet point, payout with no seller financing or shared rev stream. You can call it a payout, a payment plan. I have worked with sellers who have strictly wanted a payout over 4 to 5 years. They were firm on not wanting an earnout, as it does allow them to negotiate a higher purchase price. Here we find the risk versus reward concept. So they take a risk by extending the term of the payout and all that could be involved there if the business doesn't do well. But the reward is what we call selling at a premium. And again, this is really not a common option. And many buyers perceive that if a seller isn't offering at least some level of seller financing or revenue share, it's an indication that the seller is not real confident of the business's future performance. So overall, guys, we can see that the deal structure definitely impacts the target price. Now I'm going to hand it over to Sean so he can discuss a very critical component of preparing for retirement, one that many advisors struggle with. Take it away, Sean.
Thank you very much, Diana, and welcome everyone. I'm going to go over tip number 2, get your books in order. So as we sit here and we're considering potentially selling or buying a business, it's important to remember that prospective buyers and sellers are looking for clear, objective facts that will convince them that your business will be a profitable investment for them, and if they sell you the business, that your legacy, employees, and most importantly, their clients will be in good hands. Although they may initially be attracted to your business for one reason or another, their primary interest will and always has been to get the bottom line. This means that both buyer and seller should be able to provide one another with comprehensive, organized documentation and solid bookkeeping that demonstrates the historical performance of the business and backs up the asking price. For sellers, preparing solid financials ahead of time will help determine a fair asking price. For the buyers, having your financials in order will also give you a baseline to reference when reviewing a seller's asking price. It will also enable you to become pre-qualified for a potential loan, as Diana mentioned, is quite often involved in these transactions. In order to get started in making an accurate assessment of your business, you'll need to prepare your financial statements, ideally for the past 2 to 3 years. Hopefully you've been keeping your business records in order. If not, gather your papers together and prepare to get organized well in advance of your listing or in preparations to talk to sellers. You'll be glad you did, and this will make both the selling and the buying process go much more smoothly. To ensure the integrity of your financial records, it would be wise to seek the assistance of a small business CPA. They can help you identify any gaps or shortcomings that could be improved upon. Moreover, buyers often place more weight on financials that have been scrutinized by a qualified accounting professional. Professionally audited financials often have more validity and the potential to increase your asking price. So when we talk about these documents that you need to prepare for a business sale, there's quite a few of them. I'll go through them. Profit and loss statements, as I mentioned, for the past 2 to 3 years. A current balance sheet, a cash flow statement, business tax returns for 2 to 3 years, a copy of your current lease. This includes equipment, custody, clearing, RIA, and broker-dealer agreements, insurance policies, any non-disclosure or confidentiality agreements that the business may be bound by, an executive summary of your business, detailed profile describing the business and the business mix, any sort of supplier or distributor contracts that you may be engaged in as a standalone RIA, any employment agreements that you have with your employees. And if you are a buyer, you need to make sure that your purchase agreement has been vetted by an attorney or that you plan on using an attorney in the transaction. And for any seller financing documents, those also need to be reviewed by an attorney. Getting these financial records and reviewing them for accuracy in advance will not only help you in determining that fair asking price, but for both buyers and sellers, this exercise will give you that opportunity to identify those gaps and shortcomings that should be addressed prior to sale to help maximize value prior to any transaction. So why not improve the value of your company while keeping an eye toward future sales or acquisitions? These business valuations are always dependent on numerous factors, and adequate preparation will afford you the time to act and improve the value of your business before you need to sell or buy. Being prepared with an organized package of documents not only reflects well on you and your business, it will ward off the unnecessary stress that ultimately occurs when you go through this process. Be aware that during this process, buyers may request confidential information from you, such as a prospect and client list, which may or may not make you comfortable in disclosing, especially early in the transaction. Should that request occur, it's best to explain to the buyer why you may feel uncomfortable. Most of them will understand it, and at the same time, it will give you an opportunity to listen to their point of view. Keep in mind that researching their investment, they want to make sure that the transaction goes smoothly and that they understand exactly what it is they're buying. You can obtain some comfort level typically by getting them to execute a non-disclosure agreement and having that in place prior to providing that information. So getting these comprehensive record keeping in place, having strong financials are always a critical part of the sales process. And by applying this practice ahead of time, it's more likely to impress both prospective buyers and sellers with a well-managed business and viable enterprise. Additionally, you'll be able to develop future strategies that will increase the value of your business. For sellers specifically, this will make it easier to sell for full market value that you deserve, and buyers, it will make it easier to evaluate those values as being fair or not. Let's talk about the third tip, tying talent to the firm. It is vital to decide which employees are most valuable to your firm. And then you need to take the steps to tie these individuals to your business now and post-sale. This critical step will help ensure that your exiting of the business does not disrupt the daily operation, form, and function. There are numerous ways that you can solve for this. When thinking about tying talent to the firm and giving them skin in the game, the natural assumption is that he or she would want to own company stock. In reality, the employee may not want to contribute capital when needed, pledge personal assets to cover a loan, or share in the burden of company taxes on undistributed profits. There are other ways to satisfy this need, which may be just as, if not more, appealing. Consider all the options before you jump first thing that comes to your mind. So let's talk about various options that you can help tie talent to firm and have them have skin in the game. Bonus pools. An employer can establish a regular pay schedule and supplement it with a year-end bonus based on company performance. Typically, the employer would declare a bonus pool after year-end financials are completed and pay funds out to the eligible employees based on preset metrics or criteria. This form of profit sharing that is outside of qualified and non-qualified plan rules, and it's important that this compensation be paid shortly after it's earned. This can become part of the employee's employment agreement that stays with the firm post-sale. Another way is the qualified profit sharing plan. A qualified profit sharing plan gives employees a feeling of ownership without distributing profits currently. These plans have tax advantages for both the employer and the employee, but they require adherence with qualified plan rules. The company decides what portion of the company profit will be shared, and that amount is contributed to the plan, allocated to the employee's account, and tax deducted. Because it's a qualified plan, there are restrictions as to when and how employees can withdraw these funds. Yet another way is variable pay performance bonuses. Procedurally, a performance bonus is similar to a bonus pool arrangement, but this bonus is targeted at the key employee, who are assigned specific and measurable company goals. Each key employee is given an individual goal at the beginning of the year, and if that goal is achieved, they are rewarded with a bonus at the end of the year. This arrangement is especially effective when the employee has significant control and involvement in the outcome that determines the level of bonus. Again, this type of agreement could transfer with the sale and could be utilized even for those junior advisors. Performance-based, non-qualified deferred compensation is yet another way to tie key employees to the firm. It uses non-qualified deferred compensation arrangements. This plan can be designed so that the employer's contribution is based on the employee's meeting of those same type of performance targets as previously mentioned, but rather than paying them the award in cash, it is credited to a deferred compensation account that will vest and be paid out in the future. Common designs of this plan include phantom stock and stock appreciation rights. There are, however, a number of other ways that these designs and these programs can be put in place that use employee target metrics, sales, profit goals, new clients, accounts, etc. Another way is employee stock ownership plans. An ESOP is a qualified plan that allows the employer to borrow money to fund the plan and is designed to primarily be funded with the company's stock. This plan offers significant tax incentives both to the company and to the current stockholders. Plus, it creates significant motivation to those employees. The employees aren't direct stockholders, but they become owners through their participation in the company's qualified plan. Employee stock purchase plans, otherwise known as ESSPs, allow employees to purchase shares of their employer's stock, typically at a discount, by using after-tax payroll deductions. They can be divided into two categories, both qualified and non-qualified, and the qualified ESPPs offer tax advantages, but most follow qualified plan rules, including offering to a broad base of employees. Stock options give an employee the right to buy a certain number of shares in the company at a fixed price for a certain number of years. Employees with stock options hope the share price will go up, so they will be able to profit by purchasing the stock at the lower grant price and then selling the stock at the current market price or at the acquisition price. There are both non-qualified and qualified. Those are referred to as incentive stock option plans. And although stock options are usually thought of as an incentive for top management, a lot of financial advisory firms have been using them for key employees. Restricted stock units, RSUs, these are typically granted with restrictions as to the vesting and the ability to sell. When used as a form of compensation, stock typically becomes transferable or vested upon the satisfaction of certain conditions, such as continued employment for a period of time, and sometimes the achievement of particular financial targets is required before vesting. It's a lot to take into consideration. There are a lot of options. Obviously, we'd suggest that you engage attorneys in structuring what your key employee retention plan would look like. A lot of things to consider would be that these options may or may not be available to you based on your ownership structure. For example, if your business is structured as an LLC, you can't have an employee stock ownership plan, nor give out stock options, or provide restricted stock, or give out rights to those shares. For LLCs specifically, which we know a lot of advisors have, there are two popular ways to share ownership to those key employees. Those are profit interests and capital interests. And according to the National Center for Employee Ownership, the most commonly recommended approach for sharing equity in an LLC is to share those profit interests. A profit interest is similar to a stock appreciation right. It's not literally a profit share, but rather a share of the increase of value of the LLC over a stated period of time. The vesting requirement can be attached to that interest. The other way, which is the capital interest, is in the LLC, is equivalent to a restricted stock grant that would occur in a C or an S Corp. Rather than giving the employee the right to increase the value of the membership interest, the employee receives the full value, not just the increase from where the grant was given. So the rules for vesting and whether the employee is considered a partner or an employee would be similar to the profit interest grant. So as you can see, there are a lot of things to consider around tying talent to the firm, in addition to providing tools for them to participate in the growth and sale of the business. It's important to recognize the risk of them leaving and joining a competitor at the same time that you think about retention. That is why it is important that as you go through this process of potentially buying or selling a business, that you're reviewing these employment agreements to ensure that you have non-compete language in place. And without a doubt, it's important to recognize the key employee and to give them a reason to care about the success or the sale and the continuation of the business. But keep in mind that you, as the business owner, are also a key employee. And in the same way that you want to tie talent to the firm, a buyer can ask the same as you did your employee for a period of time. With that, I'll kick it back to Diana.
Thank you, Sean. And we are going to now go to tip number 4, allow enough time. So what I really want all of our listeners to understand is that retirement and retirement planning, those are two totally different things. You don't have to be at retirement just because you start planning for it. And this sounds obvious. This sounds like common sense, right? But you'd be surprised at how many advisors seem to avoid the planning part altogether because it makes them feel like they're already at retirement. And, it's the same concept with succession planning and selling. So many people don't want to start the conversation around succession planning because they're like, I'm not looking to sell my business. But again, two different things and two different timelines, two different parts of your career and the cycle that your business is in. So, because a lot of you guys just aren't ready to sell, you avoid it altogether. So let's take a look at how succession planning can be started as early as 10 years before you decide to make your exit. Yes, 10 years. It is imperative to give yourself enough time to transition your business to your successor, and most professionals recommend 5 years in advance, but again, we're sticking to the 10-year term here, and it may seem counterintuitive to develop an exit strategy in the growth stages of your business, but the sooner you do so, the better. All right, so we're going to take a look at the timeline and how, depending on where you are in your retirement timeline, changes the way you can start your succession planning and the structure of your succession plan. So we have long-term succession, a merger, and outright sale. So if you're planning on retiring within 5 to 10 years, you can start to look within your firm, as Sean had mentioned, or even outside of your firm, as I'll discuss in a moment. And if you feel to be more within a 3 to 5 year window, consider partnering up with another advisor. I look at this, if you compare it to real estate, I sort of look at this as a lease to own type structure. So in the beginning, you're both working, hard to run the business, but eventually you can start the conversation around a partner buyout. And then lastly, we have an outright sale, which is when you feel to be within 1 to 3 years of retirement. So I try really hard to raise awareness around early succession planning because I see that many advisors, they just don't fully know their options. And clearly that's why you guys are all here, or at least I hope it is. So you're trying to learn about these things, and I commend all of you for it. I wish there were more doing the same, but if you can identify someone in-house that is seasoned, that usually makes for the most successful plan. Or you can consider bringing in a junior advisor. Get involved in their training, embed the company's future strategies in their mind. This truly is the best way to continue your legacy of success. I had a call the other day with a group of 45 financial planning students. They're interested in joining the Succession Link platform and starting their careers in the industry, and they want mentors. You know, there's definitely opportunity here to mentor junior advisors. And I know many of you may be thinking, oh, those millennials, they don't have the same work ethic, but you'd be very surprised at just how willing they are to work, to learn the ropes, and they're hungry for knowledge. So let me say this. If you have failed to plan, you have planned to fail. I will say it again. If you have failed to plan, you have planned to fail. Strategic succession planning can easily mean growth for both parties. It does not have to adhere to a short or medium-term timeline. Let's get that thought process, that mentality out of our heads. Instead, a long-term approach can be taken with succession, okay, which would benefit you as the business owner and the oncoming advisor in many ways. So how many of you are raising your eyebrows right now, thinking, what is she talking about? Well, I challenge you all to think about succession planning as a strategic endeavor, not in Denver, rather than a contingency plan. So think growth rather than shrinkage, okay? And your plan, it doesn't only have to bring a successor or successors to your practice, but it can also bring about new business opportunities along with that. So where to start? If you have nothing in place right now, at least start with a continuity plan. Every single advisor on this webinar and that exists in the industry should have a continuity plan in place. So a continuity plan is sort of the what-if plan, which could be executed during the development of your succession plan or, in a separate event. But in the event of disaster, let's say death, you can remain confident that your business will be taken over and your clients won't experience a major disruption in service. And with changing regulations, and especially it seems just every other day now we hear about new regulations or they're thinking about new regulations. We know that there's a new SEC rollout. It's just a changing landscape. And I think the reality of the potential risks, developing both a business continuity and succession plan should be at the top of mind for advisors who just don't have them in place yet. And that brings me to my next tip, and this is my favorite tip of all. What I really enjoy talking about the most is finding the right buyer. So finding the right buyer is certainly not an overnight process, and it can be one of the toughest components of retirement planning. And if you want to ensure your future prosperity of your company for you and the sake of your employees who have worked really hard for you, your clients who have trusted in you, your family who depends on you, you'll need to prepare yourself for a lengthy search to find the right candidate to acquire it from you. So I want to talk millennials for a second. And yes, I fit right into that category. If any of you saw my picture, you're probably wondering how old I am. You either hate us, you love us, but one thing I'd say we're pretty good at is leveraging technology to do work for us when it comes to finding matches. If you're scratching your head right now wondering why the heck I have placed a few popular dating sites on the screen, Tinder, Plenty of Fish, I really want you guys to understand how technology is shifting the matchmaking industry. And, to be clear here, millennials are certainly not the only age groups that are using these applications, these websites, but they have millions of users and for a pretty good reason. And I've said time and time again, I consider advisor matching technologies, let's take Succession Link for example, to be very similar to dating sites. You post your profile. You directly message other users in hopes of, generating a group of candidates that'll take you closer to your succession goals. You go through the process of meeting people and you eventually identify the one. So let's start with compatibility. It's important to look at things like investment philosophy, location, business mix, firm size, clearing firm, broker-dealer. Finding compatibility helps ensure for a smoother transition of clients, without a doubt. But outside of the business compatibility and the business matching, look at personality matching too. It's important that you find someone with a similar personality, which usually translates into similar workflows and business goals. And then take your time. So bullet point right under personality match. Take your time in vetting your candidates. I had one advisor tell me how necessary he felt it was to start succession planning early. And once he identified a small group of candidates, he went out on lunch once a month, one lunch date a month with each one individually, which brings me to the next bullet point of dating around. My mom always told me, don't put all your eggs in one basket, and she was very right. We certainly want to get married with someone we just met a week ago, right? A month ago, you wouldn't move forward that quickly. And the concept here really is the same. So just simply take your time. It could be that you don't find the one until candidate number 6, until maybe conversation number 10. So just don't rush off with candidate number 1 so soon. Also, do a value proposition on yourself. Don't just scan up the buyer, but really look deep into your practice and ask yourself, would I buy me? Doing your due diligence on your potential buyer's book is also very important. So many sellers I've spoken to have been so focused on getting their books in order, and yes, this is an extremely critical component that Sean talked about, and it's important, but they often forget about how ensuring the buyer candidate provides financial statements too. It is perfectly okay to interview your buyer. And in doing your due diligence, start by asking for financial statements. Simply ensure that the buyer's numbers match up, that they have what they say they have. And look into previous M&A history. Feel free to ask for a contact list. If they've purchased businesses in the past, ask for that contact list. Get a hold of the previous business owners of these businesses. Ask them questions. Learn about the experience that they had, the transition, the pros, the cons, as all of that in itself is going to be a beneficial learning process for you. The more conversations you have about succession, the more you're going to learn. In the beginning, you feel like you're just dipping your toe into the water. At the end, you feel like a mini succession expert. And that literally just comes out of conversation. So if they've branded themselves and built an online presence and community reputation, do look online for reviews or testimonials or other information. And most importantly, do your research on the advisor's record. Whether the buyer is registered through FINRA or the SEC or both, you can certainly find this information online. And then finally, in determining if a buyer is the right fit for you, you'll want to ensure they can finance the deal. You're going to want to ask questions like, does the buyer have cash, or does he or she plan on self-financing? If not, is the buyer at least pre-approved for a loan, pre-qualified? Lenders themselves look closely into buyer-seller compatibility during the vetting process, which does ultimately influence their decision to write the check, right? And then this all together is just another reason you want to find the absolute best match. So let's talk a little bit about financing options. Again, I've mentioned earlier that most deals involve a little bit of buyer and seller financing, but we're going to look at our options here. Small business loans versus non-small business loans. While both SBA and non-SBA loans require some amount of cash injection, maybe around 10%, SBA loans may cover you more than a non-SBA loan. But it's important to note that SBA loans, they have very strict requirements when it comes to a seller's note. So if the primary deal is being financed via an SBA loan, then the seller note will have to take a secondary position to the SBA loan. This may not be totally attractive to a seller. Usually there's a requirement for the seller note to be put into abeyance for a period of time, I'd say around 10 years, and then the seller can begin taking payments. But non-SBA lenders, and I'll use Oak Street Funding in this case, they typically lend around 50% of the purchase price, but they don't have restrictions on the buyer paying off the seller note while the buyer is also paying off the bank note as well. So that's usually much more attractive to a seller. And regardless of which route you take, lenders do like to align the risk between the bank, the buyer, and the seller. So as I mentioned earlier, everyone has a little bit of skin in the game. They take on a huge risk if they finance 100% of the deal, as of course there's always a risk of losing some clients post-acquisition. And I usually get asked about qualification, and although lending is really not my area of expertise, It's safe to say that most banks are looking at the amount of years the buyer has been in the industry. They look at credit scores, they look at financial disclosures like bankruptcy or short sales. In some cases, they look at liquidity, and they always want to ensure the borrower has enough free cash to cover their monthly loan payment. So typically, banks don't look at projections. Some do. I know Oak Street Funding definitely does. And this is in favor of the borrower, without a doubt. Aside from that, banks look at how the chemistry, the culture, the philosophy, they look at how all of that makes sense, and for a very good reason. And this ties right into finding the best match for you and your business. And I will pass it over to Sean to talk to you about generating your exit strategy.
Thank you, Diana. As Diana previously mentioned in tip 4, your options for generating your exit will be limited if you haven't planned and don't have enough time. That is why we always say your succession plan isn't a plan if you are reacting to a life event. So let's talk about generating your exit strategy. We've talked a little bit about junior advisors already, but when you're considering your exit strategy, the most natural progression is to sell to a key employee. In financial services, that is normally a junior advisor. The greatest gift that every advisor has on this phone is the wealth of knowledge that you've obtained over the course of your career. As a business owner, you have the ability to not only protect your asset, but to see that your legacy continues on through the transfer of that knowledge. The question I always get asked is, how do I make sure that my junior advisor doesn't run off with my clients? And the answer is a little complex, but it starts with identifying the right person, and then is supported by having the right ownership structure in place and tying that individual to the firm, both through that non-compete and with the proper equity designed to be fair and to allow them to fulfill their goals and dreams while continuing on with your original business. As you can imagine, this doesn't happen overnight. And before I move to the second topic here, I want to remind everyone that there is a way for you to ask questions. You can feel free to put them into the chat, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. Let's talk about the second option, which is working in retirement. Diana mentioned this earlier, and let's face it, we aren't climbing off a roof or using a shovel on a daily basis. We are in the relationship business. That being said, many of you will have a desire to continue to work into retirement. The good news is that most of your clients will like you to do that as well. But you will need a solid supporting cast to enable you and your firm to continue to deliver a first-class client experience. What does this mean to you? It typically means less earnings. Be ready for it and understand that if your vision of retirement is being social with your clients and not reviewing performance records or dealing with custodians and account issues, you will need to have a great team and supporting cast. The first step is to understand the value of your business, what you have built to date, what it is worth. Only after completing this step can you justify what part of those future earnings you should receive based on your ongoing role that you've chosen to move forward with into retirement. If you want to segment your book and continue to be paid the same way for those accounts, be prepared to not receive any significant value for those accounts or the earnings that those assets have contributed to your business when it is sold. The third, retiring outright. This is without a doubt the most challenging of successions. To be clear, I'm not talking about retiring outright after a transition period. I'm talking about selling your business and walking away. As Diana mentioned, we typically don't see lump sums, and when these types of situations happen, it's usually because some sort of a tragic setting that someone else is selling your business for you. The main reason that this usually results in an uncomfortable situation is because it's full of risk for the buyer. In order for this type of sale to occur, it's highly suggested that there be great compatibility with the buyer. So you'll see that most of these types of sales occur through custodial or clearing firms that are sitting there trying to identify synergies within other advisors that are at the same custodian or clearing firm. Most of you have gone through custodial or clearing firm changes and understand the stress that an event like that can have on your business. So to minimize that in these retiring outright strategies, it's usually kept at those clearing and custodian firms. In addition to custodial and clearing firm changes, changing of CRMs, of reporting tools, and other technologies that are used to support the business can be equally disruptive. Finally, the need to ensure that there is great alignment. Unfortunately, this type of succession happens all too often due to advisors failing to plan and life events occurring. It usually results in a lower than desirable value for the business due to the risk associated with the client's assets departing. Usually, as I mentioned, the custodian and clearing firm will get involved in an attempt to facilitate an orderly sale. The final exit strategy that I'll discuss today is merging your business. Similar to a junior advisor, this strategy involves you joining forces with another advisor or team. This option can afford you a lot of flexibility when it comes to your version of retirement. It is still important that you obviously find a firm that shares your philosophy around investment strategy, but also has additional compatibility with your business, custodian, clearing, tech, geography, etc. So don't forget, make a decision and have a plan. Diana and I gave this same talk in Atlanta a few months ago, and an advisor approached me after the presentation and said, "My clients ask me all the time, what will happen to us if something happens to you?" He continued and said, "I enjoy skydiving, and I've actually stopped telling my clients that I'm going because it creates a conversation that I'm not prepared to have." So how many of you scuba dive, skydive, ride motorcycles, race cars, or enjoy other activities that clients may in general think are risky? If they aren't asking you what happens to us if something happens to you, they are for certain thinking about it. Number 2, collaborate and build trust to ensure the future of the practice. Regardless of your version of retirement, it's important to build trust between you and your employees, the clients, and any potential new business partner. As we are all aware, relationships are not built overnight, and in order to have a successful succession, it's important that you have a well-documented strategy and structure in place. Finally, execute a communication strategy and announce the changes. It is critically important that you deal with the succession and this plan head on. You cannot avoid the discussion, and you know your employees and your clients are not spectators watching the game from the sidelines. They have been active participants on the field of play with you. Many of your clients have been with you since you started your business, and they have always wanted you to succeed and win. Your employees have helped you get there, and if you have a solid succession plan in place, you can be confident in knowing the business will continue. Your employees will be in good hands, and your clients are in good shape. To recap, here are the 6 tips for the retiring independent advisor. Make your retirement goals clear, get your books in order, tie talent to the firm, allow enough time, find the right buyer, and generate your exit strategy. On behalf of Chalice Financial Network and Succession Link, I thank you guys for attending, and now I'll turn it back over to Cindy to lead us on some Q&A. Okay, or I'll take the first Q&A. Diana, can you still hear me?
I certainly can.
Okay. All right, so let's start with, but what if I just don't want to retire?
Oh, I've heard this one a lot. Okay, I'm not surprised we got this question. Well, if you really love what you do, I mean, I can see how you would feel this way. But sometimes, and this is really important to know, is retirement doesn't always happen by choice, right? Sometimes we're forced into early retirement. And this is why it's always good to have a plan. I mean, it could be health issues, family care, even age discrimination, and that's something I've seen in this industry too. This could all play a role in retirement. So you just may one day decide the job isn't quite what it used to be for you, maybe through all of these crazy industry changes that we've seen over the years, and you're better off having a plan at that point than no plan at all. So, great question.
Great. And I'll lead with the second question here, which is, if I help finance the sale of my business, do I have to stay on? Diana,
okay.
Do you want to take that?
Yeah, I can take this one, sure. Well, it's not really required that you stay on. I mean, if you're looking to make an exit sooner rather than later, but your buyer needs flexibility with financing, you can choose the seller financing route and not be forced to stick around, I mean, at least, full time. But if there's an earn-out involved, which I mentioned earlier, usually there's some sort of combination, it would be in your best interest to stick around. But this also ties right into feeling, as though you've chosen the absolute best buyer. If you've gone through those, buyer matching compatibility points we talked about earlier, I think you'll be confident enough in the transition being successful, and you'll be confident enough in the advisor you've chosen to come on. So I think, overall you'll feel okay with your decision to not be totally involved.
Great.
And sorry, guys. We lost audio there.
Oh, go ahead. No worries.
There we go. We're back again.
I was going to go to the question from John, but go ahead.
No, please go right ahead. John has asked us, what factors are used for succession in mergers?
So I'll take that one, Diana. So I think, and John, I can reach out to you post-conference just to make sure I'm 100% clear on that. But there are a lot of different factors that go into it. If you're talking about specific to the valuation of the business, obviously AUMs, profitability, there are a lot of different factors that go into business valuation. So much so that, we've actually, at Succession Link and at Chalice Financial Network, we have a tool that's designed to help determine the valuation of the business. So hopefully that at least gets you started on understanding some of those factors, but happy to follow up with you after.
And did you receive the question, please address the various ways to value the business?
I saw that question. Do you want me to take it, Sean?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, so yeah, Sean mentioned we do have a practice valuation tool, but I won't get too into the weeds here, but I would say if we can talk about some averages on multipliers and what I've seen. For more fee-based business, we see anywhere from 2 to 2.4 times multiplier, and then more commission-based business, we see 1 to 1.4. However, I've seen things go lower, I've seen things go higher, and there's a variety of factors that come into play when you're trying to value a business. Your assets under management, your gross trailing revenue, your average client age does play a role in that as well. Again, percent commission versus percentage fee based. So variety of factors. There's never any one set rule for valuation, but there are tools out there that really will help you get a good starting point.
Great. And again, I lost audio for a moment. I apologize, everybody. But we had a question when I go onto sites like Succession Link and I list my business for sale. I immediately get contacted by lots of buyers. How do I filter through those buyers?
So that's a great question. And we've recognized that, as Diana did mention, it is a seller's market. So from that perspective, we've put on, specifically on Succession Link, we've put a lot of infrastructure in place to attempt to identify matches, leveraging technology, as Diana stressed. And very soon we'll be rolling out something called a compatibility score, which is designed to take any of the buyers and sellers' profiles and to essentially match them up so that when you are getting inundated with a lot of potential buyers, you're able to easily identify the ones that are the highest compatibility, because we've already stressed the importance of that, as well as some additional features such as pre-qualification, being able to see which buyers are pre-qualified, all in an effort to try to streamline that activity.
Beautiful. Sean and Diana, we're at the top of the hour, so we're going to be respectful of our audience's time and sign off right now, but I want to thank you all. On behalf of all of us at Financial Advisor Magazine and FinTech News, we would like to thank our sponsor, Chalice Financial Network, and our speakers, Diana Cabrices and Sean Rogers. You did an incredible job for their presentation, and all our attendees for joining us today. As a reminder, if you'd like to submit for CE credits, please visit www.fa-mag.com for more information. Thank you all again for joining us for this webcast, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Cindy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.